Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. In any relationship, whether it be a friendship, a boyfriend girlfriend relationship, but especially a marriage, arguments are going to happen from time to time. But if there's one thing you don't want to tell your friend slash partner, it's how they should feel during and after the argument. That's a mistake Ray makes in this very episode because he tells Debra how she should feel. And she gets good payback on him. This is, of course, episode 4 of season 3, Getting Even. The premise is that Ray is going to be the auctioneer for an auction that Allie's school is holding in order to raise money to get the kids new playground equipment. Now, if this sounds like a weird thing that Ray would volunteer to do, that's because he didn't volunteer. He was voluntold to do it. He was volunteered by Debra. And of course, he's like, I don't want to be no stupid auctioneer, so he's dragging his feet the whole time. When she reminds him, right before the auction, trying to get out of it, hey, let Robert do it. Then when he gets up there, you can see why he didn't want to do it at first. He's a writer, but he doesn't really like getting up and talking in front of people. This is something that's going to come up again and again later. Which some might say that's a weird thing for someone like Ray to have that little thing. He's a writer, but there is a little bit of a difference between writing and telling a story on the page and then getting up and telling it in front of people. I mean, Stephen King even did that same joke in one of the Dark Tower novels. He was like, I'm not good at telling stories. In that case, it's the same thing. Verbally in front of people instead of writing it on the page. But it's also a little bit of a meta joke considering that Ray started as a stand-up comic. And what do? You get up in front of people and you're telling stories with your humor. I think that's why they decided to throw that character trait in there for Ray. I mean, he's funny. And in the first season, they worked in some of Ray's stand-up material, which by this point has gone out the window. But they are throwing in some jokes that you could see Ray doing up in his stand-up. Well, Ray gets up there. Like I said, it is a bit awkward. But as they're showing off the first item, which is a jewelry box that Debra made, and it starts to fall apart, which makes me wonder, what type of glue did she use in order to make it fall apart like that? Was it bad glue? Was she moving it about too much when it hadn't dried yet? We all know the real reason, plot. Well, as it's going down, Ray slowly works into it as he's doing an auction, like trying to describe it, and he's slowly lowering the price and getting people to laugh. And he gets into it, and it makes the night. We don't see the rest of the auction, but based on how they talk about it, it seems that really got him warmed up, set the stage, and it got him into it, and he managed to help them raise enough money to get the equipment. But it also humiliated Debra. And she's mad once they get home. And he's like, don't be embarrassed. Don't tell me how to feel. And the whole thing about couples not going to bed angry, but Debra says she's not mad anymore. And she just says, just watch. Which Ray is remembering throughout the rest of the episode. Because despite what Debra says the next day, it was just the heat of the moment. I'm sorry, I'm not going to get you. Ray is thinking, she says that, but that sounds like something someone who's going to get somebody would say. And so he's paranoid throughout the rest of the episode. You shook the soda, didn't you? Oh, soda for breakfast, as an example. And it turns out by the episode's end, Ray is correct. Debra was playing the long game. But her revenge wasn't actually getting Ray. Her revenge was making Ray think she was going to get him. And then making him go crazy. Thinking like, how's she going to get revenge on this? Because as she puts it herself in the end of the episode, nothing that I could think of to do to you would be any better than what's in that beautiful mind. So Ray drives himself crazy. He should have just put it out of his mind. If he had done that, Debra would not have gotten her revenge. And she probably might have had to try to get him in anyway. But she might have been like, guess he's not as paranoid. But it shows just how much she knows him too. That, I'll get him this way. Debra going through with her plan in the way she does, based on how we see Ray behave right before they go to bed, and how we've seen him behave in previous episodes in these first 3 seasons, you can't fault her for doing it. I mean, it's not the best and most mature thing to do in a marriage, But you understand why she's doing it. Because at this point in the show, even though we like the characters, we're starting to wonder, like, why does Debra put up with Ray and his antics? I mean, we know they love each other, and it's that love and some mutual understanding gets them through it. But when you see stuff like this, you're like, why does she put up with him? If these characters really existed, I bet a lot of Debra's friends would be telling her, you got to get out of this marriage. Or a couple of them would be, and then Ray, hopefully, probably would have learned by now not to fall into his parents' things, but if you read enough stuff on Reddit, you see in some instances that's not the case. There is a deleted scene for this episode, which this is one I can see why it was deleted when they put the episode to air, and that is that it helps set the stage for the auction bit, but like the Jabba scene being put back into the first Star Wars film, it just repeats info that is shown again later. The only gag is that it ties into Ray sometimes forgetting stuff, and that is that Debra springs the auctioneer job on Ray. Ray argues it, and then she's like, I thought you listened to me. Which, of course, ties into the thing we see in the next scene, like the auction for Allie's school. The auction, the auction! Introducing it that way, I think, is a better way to introduce it instead of springing it like this. The termite is a little bit different than the termite ones. The termite ones, those scenes could have worked, but ultimately you see why they're cut out for pacing and joke reasons. They're just having them introduced when Marie walks in and sets the stage better. This one, you repeat the information in the next scene anyway, so snip, snip, don't need the scene. This is another episode written by Steven Scroven, which is a name we've heard before. We're going to hear it again throughout this season. I mean, he also wrote Halloween Candy, Cruising with Marie, and Dancing with Debra. And I think he did manage to capture the relationship between Ray and Debra perfectly in this one. Even though in real life, like I mentioned, the little thing with the little argument goes a little bit into immature territory. But that's sitcom writing for you. You gotta take it. It's like with professional wrestling. You take something and you make it a little bit more exaggerated, and that's the entertainment behind it. Although, depending on what sitcom you're watching, some things might not have aged well. There's not really much in this show that I've seen so far that hasn't aged that well. Although, the one thing I keep referencing later on, oh boy, I don't even know how that even aged within the writing room, but that was the late 90s, early 2000s for you. Now, this is one thing IMDb mentions, but without there being a commentary or me having watched the episode, I can't say for certain how close the two episodes are. The plot of this episode is a take on an old episode of MASH called The Joker is Wild, which been a while since I've done these notes, but if I remember correctly, when I looked it up, that was from a later episode of MASH. Just like another episode of the show was a take on a Dick Van Dyke Show episode. So they're just going to take ideas from previous sitcoms and then give them a more modern spin, but that's what happens. It's just like professional wrestling again. You take older ideas from angles and finishes, and then you tweak it slightly and you give it a more modern flair. That's what you tend to do. I mean, films do it all the time, too. I mean, sometimes you just take a shot and then incorporate it into another movie. I mean, that famous shot from Star Wars where Luke is in front of the burning carcasses of his aunt and uncle, that's a shot taken from The Searchers. Only other thing to mention that's very entertaining about this episode is the Frank subplot. And that is, at the auction, in addition to the auction that Ray is hosting, we also got a silent auction, which is they have a bunch of pieces of paper out on a table with different things, and you just write down your name and how much you're bidding for it, and then by the end of it, that's the end of it. And Frank is bidding on it initially just to get the prices to go up. And, as Marie's lecturing him, hey, silent auction! And he ends up winning one of them. Now, I have a feeling he probably won more than one of them, but the main one that he mentions was a canoe ride, which he's mad about. He thinks it's a con job, and as he puts it, that's floating crap. Which by the end of the episode, we see him and Marie were going to go take it to do a picnic. Frank does what we assume he was going to do, and that is that once Marie's in it, he pushes the boat out, and she goes, and she doesn't even have a paddle. And then, of course, the music they use is a take on the Dueling Banjos theme. Now, 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 now. Which is a tie-in to one line that Frank says to Marie earlier when she's saying a canoe ride can be romantic. And this is a joke that if you do not know about Deliverance and you haven't seen it, you're not going to get that much. I still haven't watched Deliverance, by the way, but I get the joke because I at least know what goes on in Deliverance. And that is, bet you didn't see Deliverance, did you? It's one of those ones that if you know the context of what he's referencing, you're like, ooh, that's dark. That is a dark joke for a sitcom, but it is so in Frank's character to say something like that. But I'm surprised Marie didn't overreact a bit more, like, oh, stop. But I guess there's not enough time in that part of the episode in order to get a reaction like that in. Overall, this is an entertaining episode. I mean, the whole fight goes a little bit more into the immature territory, but this is why you don't tell someone else how to feel. Whether it's a fight like this, telling them, hey, you shouldn't feel that way from what you saw on TV or what you read or whatnot. You never tell them how to feel, because there's no right or wrong way how to feel. Well, and that concludes my thoughts on this episode. The next episode, it's going to be another episode revolving around Debra's parents, and in this case, it's just her mother coming to visit while Warren is off doing Warren-y stuff, which this early in the show is like, wonder why. But then once we get to an episode later in the show, we're going to be like, so that's why he did that by himself. Probably a little bit of early foreshadowing, but it could also just be backloaded storytelling in sitcom writing of why that is. But of course, this is The Visit, and has one of my favorite ending gags, but that's going to be the next video.